What's up, guys? Well, last night we got episode 9 of Better Call Saul's final season, titled Fun and Games. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm complicated on this episode. This might be the first episode of the season where I don't really know whether or not I like it a lot for what it does, or whether or not it frustrates me for what it does. So after the, call it mid-season finale, and of course last week whenever we were brought in back into these final 6 episodes, those were 2 breakneck episodes where things were going a mile a minute. We had huge stakes, we had huge deaths, and big, like, story-shifting things going on. And last week especially gave me the impression that these final stretch of episodes was just going to be absolute batshit insane, just the way that the basically entire final season of Breaking Bad was. And maybe it's my fault for setting myself up for false expectations, because this episode was yet again a bit of a downshift, going back to the pacing of the first few episodes of the season. And it kind of, it worked more as like an epilogue for the previous 2 episodes. If you want to bundle those 2 episodes together regarding the death of Howard Hamlin and the death of Lalo, this was just kind of a moment for the season to take a breath and let all of the characters kind of deal with what just happened and set the final pieces in place and tie a few things off with a bow. And for the way that the episode ends, maybe the last time that we see these characters in this timeline. And while I really enjoy that, while I enjoyed the fact that we get to kind of wrap up certain things going on and give very direct hints about how things went from the end of the Better Call Saul timeline to where we eventually find Saul in Breaking Bad, I also feel like the downshift was a little frustrating for me. You know, I'm ready to go. So the episode starts off, you've got Jimmy and Kim kind of going about their daily life, doing their regular thing where they're trying to act like nothing happened. They don't know what happened to Howard Hamlin and just carry on with everyday lawyerly things, while it cuts back to Mike and crew cleaning up the blood and cleaning up the crime scene and getting rid of all of the evidence. And it's very clear from the beginning of this episode and from just the way of their character demeanors are that Saul's going to be able to just carry on and quickly move past this and just act like it never happened, and Kim is not. And their storyline was easily the best part of this episode for me, because they're the characters that are going to be most significantly affected by what just happened over the past 2 episodes, and they're the ones that us as viewers are most curious on where things are going to go. Now that they have wrapped up the Howard Hamlin storyline, now that they have wrapped up the Lalo storyline, and we can pretty much fill in any tiny little gaps that are left regarding Gus and Mike, they're the only character fates and character stories that we still have giant question marks for these final 4 or 5 episodes. And so whenever it gets back to them and it shows Kim later on in the episode basically taking herself out of the practice of law, you know, giving her notice to the bar, removing herself from her cases, and Jimmy freaking out and showing us pretty directly how these characters parted ways. Since we've never heard of Kim, never seen her in Breaking Bad, you've always had that question, is she going to die? Is she going to be handed over to Robert Forster to change her identity? Is she just going to leave? What's going to happen? And for what we can assume right now, she just leaves. You know, she packs up her shit. She can't be with Jimmy anymore. And it was a really touching scene, because you can tell that they both want to be with each other. They both want to stay with each other. They both want each other, need each other in very certain ways. But Kim is the one who can realize and can actually be adult enough to admit the fact that they're like fire and gasoline for everybody that's around them. And even though that they complement each other very well and they love each other and they're each other's best friends and all that stuff, she knows that if she stays with Saul, she's going to be the worst version of herself. And she's only going to enable him to be the worst version of himself. I love that line where she tells him that she knew that Lalo was still alive. And when he asks, "You didn't tell me?" And she basically says, "No, I didn't tell you for all of these reasons that make sense as a wife, because you would have been upset, you would have had PTSD, we probably would have broke up. But above everything else, I was having a fucking blast doing all these scams, and I didn't want that to be over." And the fact that she recognized that that was her main motivation, and that's what causes her to start packing up all her stuff, I thought that was a really great character moment for Kim. I also really appreciated the scene between Mike and Nacho's father. A nice way to tie a nice bow over that storyline. We haven't really addressed Nacho since the beginning of this season, whenever he passed away. And so I like the fact that continuing to make Mike one of the most compelling and just complex characters in this universe. You know, he's somebody that's very by the book, by the rules as far as his work. He takes it 100% seriously. He also has this moral compass. And, you know, he thinks that anybody that's involved with this gang and involved with this mob life, and you pretty much set yourself up. If you die, whatever, you sealed your own fate as far as Mike's concerned. But people that were not in the game, like Howard Hamlin, he kind of has a bit of a humanity and a bit of a regret towards them. And even somebody like Nacho, and the way he's talking to his father, where he's like, look, your son made some very bad choices, got in with some very bad people, but he was better than all of this. He had a good heart. He didn't deserve to go out this way. And just the way that he can navigate that in this very black and white world of crime continues to make him possibly my favorite character in both of these shows. And so I love the fact that he went and did something that Gus would have never wanted him to do and probably would not have allowed him to do if he had asked permission, and tries to give Nacho's father some closure, tries to give him a bit of relief, you know, something, just an answer to the question of where is my son. And I like the fact that his father kind of throws it back into Mike, because as much as I love Mike, and as much as Mike seems like the biggest moral compass in both of these shows, and he's the most respectable one of all these shows, he's still a criminal. He's still a murderer. He's still somebody that has very much done a lot of bad things. And so I like the fact that his father throws it back at him whenever he's like, hey, you know, we're going to get justice. We're going to get justice for your son. Don't worry. And he says, you know, you guys are all the same. This isn't justice. And just kind of holds that mirror up to Mike where he can kind of look at it and say, you know, he's right. I'm not any different than Gus. I'm not any different than the Salamancas. You know, I might carry myself differently, but I'm still motivated by the same thing, money. I'm still using the same kind of fucked up definitions of what is justified and what is justice. And so it's moments like that where you can take a character that you love and you kind of identify with to a certain degree and still call them out on their bullshit. I think that was a really well-written scene. Now, as far as the Gus side of this episode, this is where I have the most conflicted feelings, because on one end, I love the fact that we keep going back to this swimming pool setting, the one where his partner / possible lover was killed in Hermanos in season 4 of Breaking Bad, and then the setting where he finally ultimately gets his revenge in Salud in the same season. And we keep going back to that as like this setting of congregation between the cartel and Gus. And there's so many subtle things in this scene that I love. I love the way that Gus has his calm demeanor, because he knows that Eladio is not going to believe Hector. He knows that Hector is making himself out to be the crazy, jaded old man of this group. And so he sits down and doesn't even say a word as far as defending himself. I thought that that was a badass move to do. I like the attempts at tension in this scene of whether or not they're going to find out. The problem is that it's a prequel and we know that they're not going to find out. And so that's where the scene kind of undercuts itself a little bit, which is hard to navigate. It's hard to navigate for a prequel. That's why most prequels I'm not really a big fan of, this being a wild exception to that. I think it's been done brilliantly thus far. But when you know that Gus is going to be fine, when you know that Hector and Eladio and all of them are going to end up at a certain place for Breaking Bad, the intended effect of this scene doesn't quite come across the way that I think it's supposed to. If we were watching this show chronologically and you would have some genuine tension, didn't see Breaking Bad yet, still a very good scene. I still like the way, they show fire and embers in the reflection of Gus's glasses, which I think is trying to give a visual metaphor for his brewing hate. I love the line that they leave off on with Eladio where he's like, hey, I looked in your eyes and I may not have saw lies, but I saw hate. And a little hate's okay, as long as you know your place. And just that stuff right there where eventually that Gus is going to fucking kill all of them. You're just like, oh yes, your day is coming, bitch. So I like that scene. I don't think that it's as successful as they wanted it to be. And I really didn't care for the wine scene. That was the scene where I was actually getting bored in this episode. And I just don't really understand what the point of it is. I think at this point you could make the assumption that Gus is gay and that his partner in season 4 Breaking Bad was actually his lover. That's been a big fan theory for a long time, for good reason, because it's very directly hinted at. And, his bloodlust, his, fueling revenge, that is just defined his entire life after that moment where that guy got shot in the head. That's the most natural conclusion that you can draw. And so I don't know if we needed a whole scene to where they're teasing this attraction to this waiter, and they're talking about wine for like what felt like 10 minutes. And so I understand what they were going for in this scene. They're trying to not only hint more towards that, but also show that Gus, while he could very easily start a relationship with this person or anybody else and go on and be happy, his life is now dedicated to this revenge. And so as soon as he's happy, he's smiling, he's enjoying himself, and then he takes that last sip of wine, and then just that face comes back over him. And it's back to business. It's all about setting up this revenge again. And I understand that. I understand what they're trying to get across. I just feel like we get it. We get it at this point. I don't know if that was necessary. So as much as I love the character of Gus, as brilliant as Giancarlo is in all these scenes, his stuff in this episode was the most frustrating for me. And now let's talk about where the episode leaves off, which is presumably this time jump. When I first watched the episode, I didn't take it as that. I just kind of took it as a scene that was going to be, again, we have so many flash forwards and flash sideways and everything like that in this show that I just kind of took it as another one of those scenes that were just showing how Jimmy turns out once Kim is out of his life. But I've seen a lot of people online talking about this being a flash forward, so that might actually be it. I don't know how they're going to do that with, like 3 more episodes left, but I have no idea where they're going to go with this show. I have no idea what they're going to do. They've been solving a lot of the storylines very early on in the season, and so it's kind of carte blanche from here on out. I don't know where they're going to take me, and I'm excited to find out. So that very well might be just a flash forward. Now we're done with the Better Call Saul storyline. We're done with that timeline. Everything's wrapped up. Everything's, for the most part, answered. And now we're going to jump forward years in time to where Better Call Saul is now over, and now we're in Breaking Bad territory. Now Saul is the Saul Goodman that we met in season 2 in the Better Call Saul episode. They show him in his mansion. They show him with presumably a hooker or somebody like that, or somebody that he met in a bar, and he's got, like, it's the most douchebag version of Scarface you've ever seen, where he's got a golden toilet, he's got leopard print stuff, and it really just shows kind of where his life and where him as a person goes after he loses Kim. Now it's all material, it's all, shine, it's all varnish. It's just him trying to have all these excesses and just basically live till he dies and just do whatever he wants to do. And so it kind of gives a little bit more of an added context to the character that we eventually meet, and we don't necessarily need to have any more context in the Better Call Saul storyline. We don't need to have any more episodes there. So I'm actually fine if that is genuinely a flash forward, which it seems to be, because they've done everything they could in this episode to tie off the Nacho storyline, for the most part tie off the Gus storyline, where he has set Mike to go and start construction again, and now Kim has left. We don't actually have to have an episode of her getting on a plane or anything like that. So I'm very curious. I'm very curious where they're going to go now. They've got 4 episodes left in this show, and I have no idea what is left. I have no idea where they're going to take us. Obviously, we have to close out the Gene storyline at some point, but as far as what they're going to do in this Better Call Saul timeline, aside from having a Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul cameo, I'm fascinated to find out what extra storyline we're about to get. I mean, the way that Breaking Bad closed out, a lot of people consider Ozymandias to be the actual series finale, and then the final 2 episodes of Granite State and Felina to be kind of this extended epilogue. And it feels like Better Call Saul is very much doing the same thing, where this really feels like this could have been the series finale in a certain way. This has wrapped up all of the storyline that we have spent now 6 seasons exploring, and now we're going to get like a 4-episode epilogue, as well as a flash forward, kind of like the El Camino storyline, if you want to go that far. And so I'm just curious. I'm very curious, and I love the fact that I have no clue what is in store. So I did like this episode. To me, I was just caught off guard with the breakneck pace of the last 2 episodes, just to once again slow down when it feels like this show's at the point where now it needs to be just pedal to the metal to the end. But Better Call Saul has always been a very deliberately paced show, so I guess I should not have expected that. So what do you guys think about episode 9? Let me know down in the comment section, and where do you think the show is going to go in the next 4 episodes? That's it for me, guys. Please, if you enjoyed this video, click over here and check out my playlist of all of my other Better Call Saul reviews, as well as my ranking of the Breaking Bad seasons. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next 4 reviews to come, as well as my rankings that are going to be in the future. And as always, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.